Greetings again, do-it-yourselfers. So what we're going to do in this video, as promised, we're going to do a EGR diagnosis. At least I believe we are. This is going to be a follow-up video to the Diagnosis and Understanding series for EGR valve diagnosis and understanding. We are not going to do a tutorial on EGR diagnosis. This will assume that you have seen the previous video or you have full understanding of the operation of all the components of an EGR system, which I believe we're going to find a problem in this car with. So what I'm going to do in this video, instead of a tutorial, I am going to basically diagnose and fix this pretty much what I would do if I wasn't filming this. So we're going to go through it fairly quickly, but the idea is to show the thought process of the diagnosis, which all diagnosis is actually thought process if you think about it. So that's what we're going to do. So without any further ado, let's fix this bitch. So history on the car. This car was purchased as a used car from a private individual. The person who purchased it is a friend of a friend of a friend kind of thing. And what happened is, of course, they went to license the car. To license the car in this state, you have to pass an emissions exam, which the car failed. And it failed because of a high nitrogen oxide output, and because of the pattern of the output, which I'll show you. This is why I'm going in the direction without any other diagnosis so far. I'm going to start with the direction of an EGR valve. Mind you, I am not calling an EGR valve based on an output from an emissions test. Only an idiot would do that. But it is a good direction based on the data that I believe we're going to have an EGR problem. Thus the reason I did the Diagnosis and Understanding series for EGR earlier. There is no check engine light though, so I'm a little worried that maybe it may not be an EGR valve problem. Then I'm expecting a non-opening EGR. I would certainly expect a check engine light. This is a 2000 Nissan Maxima. I would totally expect a check engine light for non-opening or even a clogged EGR. There is no check engine light though, so it may get a little interesting, but that's still the direction that I'm going to start with. Let me go ahead and show you why I'm starting with the direction of EGR. If that turns out not to be the case, then we're going to have to go to the dry erase board of knowledge, do a differential diagnosis of all the possible causes of high nitrogen oxide emission, and we'll have to rule it out that way. But let's go ahead and show you why I'm starting with my current hypothesis. All right, so I've zoomed into the output emissions. I just wanted to cover up stuff to protect the owner identity and VIN number and stuff like that. But what we've got is we see we're within spec for our hydrocarbon and CO and all that. But we can see that our nitrogen oxide emission at 2.0, I believe this is going to be in grams per mile, I believe are the units here. And we can see that we're at a little over 2. The limit is 1.5, and that is a fail, and the reason for the failed emissions. And then also, I just noticed something else here. And what I noticed here, this is, I think, going to be a little bit of a problem here. We've got a check engine light fail. And what that is that actually does not mean that the check engine light is on. What that means is that it failed the bulb test. How many times have I mentioned in other videos, and especially in my video on how to buy a used car, to do a bulb test for the check engine light to make sure that it works. And my assumption is this fail is actually going to be a check engine light that is not going to come on. That's what that means. It doesn't mean that the light is on. The check engine light pass would mean that the check engine light bulb test comes on, and then you might see diagnostic trouble codes that they pulled. With a check engine light on, or with a failed check engine light to come on at all with the bulb test, generally that's an instant fail, because either way you have no way of knowing if you have either a fault with the emission system, or if you have the check engine light already on, another fault that comes on with another emission system. So they do not pass cars with check engine light issues either way. So I think the first thing I want to do is do a bulb test real quick. All right, and I'm actually not sure where the check engine light would show. I've never seen a Nissan Maxima before, actually. But let's see here. Nope, anywhere we look, we've got an airbag light up there, which is the other thing I always look for. But we do not have a check engine light anywhere. So this definitely, they definitely caught that. The owner should have done a bulb test on buying the car. I'm going to gather to say, because I'm going to have to replace a instrument panel bulb, that is going to be a more costly repair than whatever we find is wrong with the car not passing emissions. So that's kind of a bummer. All right, well, that I believe actually is the third video of mine now that I've actually shown an actual demonstration of a used car that was purchased that had a check engine light bulb failure. So it definitely happens, and it can be an expensive lesson learned. But anyway, that does change things a little bit, because now we may very well find a diagnostic trouble code in the computer, so we'll definitely check for that. We would anyway, and when the owner said there's no check engine light, it's actually not because there's not a code, it's because the bulb is either burned out or most likely removed, as I found before. But anyway, despite all that, the reason that I'm going in the direction of EGR on this vehicle is because of this failure with the nitrogen oxide emissions here. So what we've got on this top graph here is the darker line here is the vehicle speed. As I mentioned in the check engine light video that I did a while back, they'll do 2 consecutive drive cycles to try to get back-to-back failures of any emissions components to cause a check engine light to light up, which of course wouldn't happen in this car. But basically, they follow this drive cycle, simulating some city driving and stop-and-go driving right here, and highway driving for a sustained time. So that's what the dark line is vehicle speed. There's no throttle response indication here. It's just vehicle speed, so we kind of have to guess at where throttle may be. But the background here is your NOx emissions here in the lighter ink. And that's with all the spikes. And as we can see, when the vehicle is in motion, and especially here, and in this region here, but especially here and here, when we've got throttle open and a certain mile per hour, close to 30, this is where we're expecting to have the EGR valve called to be open. And these are the parts where we have the highest nitrogen oxide emissions. And also here at highway speeds, we would definitely expect here to have the EGR valve open during a highway cruise for sure. And we have higher nitrogen oxide emissions in this area. So again, other things can cause this. It is not definitive. But the thing that really kind of does it for me is right here. This is the vehicle coming to a complete stop. We, of course, are going to not expect, with a vehicle at idle, as shown in the previous tutorial video, we're not going to have the EGR open by any means here. And as we can see, the oxides of nitrogen are at their lowest here. Now that, of course, might be just because the car's at idle anyway. But my putting together this based on having seen this before and knowing when I'm expecting the EGR to open, it does appear we're going to have a non-opening EGR. That is our best explanation for this graph, despite the fact that we don't have check engine light or check engine codes shown, at least according to this customer's paperwork. But let's go ahead and hook up to the scan tool and check for codes right now and see what we get. And having never seen a Nissan before, I'm hoping that my scan tool will be compatible with this, but if not, I'll certainly have to just get a code reader. And as we know from the previous EGR video, I certainly do have manual ways of testing the EGR, but I'd like to do it with the scan tool to save time, since that's what I would normally do if I wasn't filming this. Let's see, there's Nissan. And I did mention in the previous video I thought it was going to be a Ford coming in which case I would have covered the DPFE sensor, which is part of the EGR system, especially for Fords. I don't know what made me think this was a Ford coming in. I must have mixed it up with another car that I had. But anyway, my apologies. I did say if this was a Ford, we would cover DPFE. But even if it was, we wouldn't be able to have the time to do it because we've got a whole different issue with the check engine light. All right, we are making progress. It's just this is really slow communication for some reason, and this again is one of the limitations I'm going to have with having, more like a $1,000 scan tool instead of a $15,000 professional scan tool. But right now I'm just hoping I'll be able to read some codes. I doubt I'm going to be able to do any EGR valve movement tests or anything. Well, maybe I can. All right, let's go ahead and get the codes here. And while it's doing that, let's see what I'm going to be able to test for EGR. And it won't let me do that until I get the codes up there. All right, this is really slow. I'm just going to cut until we get our codes. All All right, finally we got some codes up here, and check it out, right up here, 0400 EGR flow. How about that? Right there. So that is actually good. That means that my diagnostic reasoning, well, actually it wasn't reason, it was a little bit of reasoning there, but it's kind of more experience that I used to make that call. But like I said, I've seen this before a couple times, and again, it makes sense. We know from the operation of the EGR valve when we would expect operation. We know that we would have lower oxide of nitrogen emissions from an operating EGR valve. It's a pretty good bet the EGR valve was a problem there, but many, many other things could cause a high oxide of nitrogen emission on a vehicle besides EGR. So, you know, if I didn't see that pattern with the driving, I might have thought of something else. But anyway, we are definitely going after an EGR. Now, notice this doesn't tell us that we've got a problem with the valve or anything. As usual, EGR problems are fairly cryptic. We will have to do some diagnostic there, but I do believe we're going to have some type of non-opening problem. Let's see down here what I've got that I may be able to do this. And I find that, you know, a lot of times on import cars, even if I have these options down here, there's an EGR control valve right there, that these don't actually work. But let's go ahead and try this real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and start the engine up, and we'll see if we can get this control valve. Yeah, we'll be able to open it. Let's see if we've got a, yeah, let's open it up quite a bit here and see if we can get the engine to die. Okay, and then let's see. And again, if this doesn't do anything, it doesn't mean anything. A lot of times I just find that on this scan tool, it just doesn't work a lot of times on import cars. It just doesn't. I don't hear anything changing. So I'm trying to, so it's got steps. So this may be a different type of EGR valve than what we saw in the Diagnosis and Understanding series with the GM one and also with the solenoid vacuum one. I have no idea what the EGR valve control is going to be on this, but basically either we're not getting any difference, or more likely actually the scan tool just isn't working and it's not really actually doing anything. So that's kind of a problem here. So we'll have to go ahead and do some manual tests and see what's happening here. All right, well, that is a common frustration I deal with all the time, not having professional grade equipment. And it's one of the reasons why, like any do-it-yourselfer, we generally have to resort to manual testing methods, and that is going to be the case here. Of course, I'm also not only going to do a manual testing method to fix this, but I want to also do manual testing methods to verify that the scan tool may actually have commanded the EGR open, but of course we expect a non-opening or clogged EGR situation here, and therefore we wouldn't know if the computer worked or not. But in my experience, a lot of times that's just the computer just has that option available, but it doesn't work. What I'm doing, I've never seen one of these in my life before, so I'm trying to find where EGR is, and it doesn't look like it's going to be as conveniently located as the one on my Trans Am, that's for sure. But like any advanced do-it-yourselfer, this does not mean I go onto Yahoo Answers or some chat room and ask, where is the EGR valve on a Nissan, and have some Haynes manual jockey who wouldn't know an EGR valve from a fuel pressure sensor look in his Haynes manual and tell me where it is, as if he's some kind of expert when he never even got out of his armchair. So I certainly don't do that. I know I'm going to be able to find the EGR valve despite never seeing this engine before or any Nissan, because I know how they operate, because I watched my video before this one. So I know that that must be it, right? Wow, is that it? That does seem to be. We've got a thing that is bolted to the, it looks like it's bolted to the intake manifold. It is in a horrible location. I'm not liking this at all, because I won't be able to back probe it without removing the intake snorkel and Oh, it's right under the throttle body. Ah, this really blows, but that must be it. So let me just verify by feeling if there is a pipe from that valve. If I can reach my hand in here, if there's a pipe from that valve to the exhaust, that's going to be it, right? So we don't need to... Oh, that's going to be a problem because I think that is indeed the EGR valve. So let me give you a shot of this thing, and then I'm going to have to do some dissection to get at this. Let's see, where is it? There it is. If we look right behind that little copper pipe thing, there's a black cap there. And if we look here, there is a connector coming out of it. Maybe we can see the connector out of it underneath the throttle body there. I believe that is going to be the EGR valve, so let me go ahead and dissect that thing out. After removing a bunch of the intake ducting, we can get a good shot of our EGR valve. Well, kind of a good one there. Our connector right there, and you probably can see, let's see if we can get the screwdriver on there, but there's our EGR pipe. Right on the bottom, that rusty looking thing is the EGR pipe, so we know for 100% certain we've got an EGR valve here, and now it becomes sort of a matter of what is the strategy we want to use to test this guy. I need to get that connector off, and actually we need to look at a wiring diagram, but my inclination would be, of course, to take this thing off and bench test it because of the ease of doing that versus back probing it. Because I really kind of don't want to put everything back together after putting some back probes and running some leader wires and everything, and then have to take it all back apart again because I won't be able to reach my back probes, and I want to be very careful not to, of course, short circuit anything. My concern is I'm a little bit put off by the steps that we saw as an indicator of EGR position on the scan tool. I am convinced this is probably going to be a stepper motor EGR valve, and that is going to be, if you saw my Trans Am woes with my IAC, the idle air control, which is also a stepper motor, you do not just bench test a stepper motor because it has this alternating polarity on two different electrical fields, and it's not something that you just put 12 volts to it and see if it opens. It's not like that at all. So let's take a look at a wiring diagram if I can find one, because we may be limited in how we're going to be able to test this thing. All right, we've got ourselves a little bit of a challenge here, and that is I'm going to have to hope that my scan tool works. Boy, this really blows because we do have a stepper motor here. And that means we're not just going to be able to bench test this thing. So our possibilities are we could remove the valve from the car and see if we've got a carbon blockage. We could certainly do that. And as much as I've got disassembled here, I don't think it's going to be that difficult to see if we've got a, oops, there goes my computer. See if we've got a carbon blockage. That is definitely one valid thing we could do. Another way, I could go ahead and do back probes on one of these steppers here. I will not really be able to. This is where a frickin' scope would come in handy, because this is the same problem I'm going to have that I had on my Trans Am with that IAC. I wonder if I can rig that IAC tester that I used for my IAC problem on the Trans Am somehow here. The other way to do it would be to hook a voltmeter up there, but it's not going to, it's going to be a little hard to see if I'm really getting good signal there. At least it would indicate I am getting some signal there if I use the scan tool to turn it on. So let me think about that. So I think that's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and back probe this thing and see if we can get evidence that there's EGR movement. Well, once in a long while I will catch a break. Not that I have so much with the design of this car. Can't say I'm a huge fan of this Nissan engine, and I hope I never see one again. But in order to get a really good look at the connector so I could do the back probes here, I wanted to make sure of the back probing that I was doing. And in order to do that, I really had to remove the throttle body to get a really good look at the wiring for the connector. It just wasn't working otherwise. And in doing so, I did not even think about it, but the EGR pipe goes up into the intake, of course, here. And it is completely stuffed with carbon. We'll see if we can give you a look at that. Maybe you can see at the top of that EGR tube, but it is absolutely completely clogged with carbon. Let's see if we can get the light on there. This is not an easy shot to do. All right, there we go. Oh yeah, there. You can see. There we go. So that is, I believe, what our problem is going to be. It is really jammed up, so I'm going to have to remove that tube and put some kind of pipe cleaner through it or something. But we definitely caught a break there. And the reason, of course, we caught a break there is because with the stepper type motor and my not yet having a lab scope yet, that would have been very difficult to do the traditional testing that I showed in the previous video. Of course, in the previous video, I had mentioned there are many different designs of systems. The one that we looked at was a solenoid type with a position validation, like a TPS sensor, a potentiometer to validate position. We also saw a vacuum solenoid type. This is a different type. This is a stepper motor type, which I do not have a really good way of testing. And the thing is that if I put my scan tool up to it, what I wanted to do was be able to turn the valve on and then see that we're getting command as a result of turning the valve on with my scan tool. But using a voltmeter, we wouldn't have really been able to have a good way of doing that because it's going to jump all over the place like crazy because of the alternating polarity and quickly changing currents. So it's really a thing for a lab scope. You can see there are applications where you want a lab scope, even if you have a scan tool, by the way. Remember, with any professional scan tool, unless you know for a fact that the scan tool does open the valve when you command to do it, well, in this case, very likely maybe we were opening the valve, but of course it wouldn't have any effect with all of that clog. So kind of caught a break here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and clean that carbon out. And then once I finish the repair and put it back together, we'll put this back on the scan tool. And then now we'll go ahead and activate the valve with the scan tool. If the engine stumbles or dies, then we know we've got a fix and the scan tool works. If, however, the engine does not, well, we're kind of back at square one. Did the motor also have a problem? Is the motor dead? Or did my scan tool not work as it does on many cars? It just doesn't work. You do the command and nothing happens. So we'll see if we get lucky after I do the repair, and that will be a good day if we find that the repair does work and we validate it with the scan tool. Actually, that'll be a really good day. So we'll see what happens. Well, while I'm doing this repair, I thought I'd show you a couple things that I haven't seen before. This kind of explains why it's so hard to do a comprehensive tutorial on EGR. But the two pipes, they kind of looked like coolant pipes. I thought maybe they were to a DPFE, even though they look, awful big for that. And it turns out that you can hear by the dripping coolant and see there that they are indeed actually coolant pipes. So coolant does pass through this EGR, maybe apparently to cool the gas, I would say, is the reason for that. I'm not totally sure, but that seems pretty reasonable, especially considering the function of the EGR. And the other thing, too, that's pretty interesting that may even validate that, this little yellow tabbed wire here is actually a temperature sensor. It's an EGR temperature sensor here that I'll have to remove to get that pipe out. But two components that on the tutorial I never even knew existed, to be honest with you. And it just goes to show that there are lots of variances with different cars and different models. So what we've got here is, of course, EGR valve. And let me get a flashlight. Okay, and we can see the pintle opening is not blocked, nor is the EGR pipe opening. So hopefully that valve is good and this guy will be able to get out of here with no parts. This, of course, is the EGR tube that now you can clearly see is totally blocked up with carbon, and that is the problem there. Let's see if we can free that up. All right, we'll see if maybe we can pop this out with some compressed air. All right, so let's see, and yeah, we've got the opening here for that temperature sensor, so I'll have to plug that up. And let's see if this works. Wow, that's pretty plugged up. Wow, yeah, that's not blowing out for the dramatic camera effect that I was hoping for, so I guess I'll have to get a screwdriver or something and clear that out by hand. All right, let's see what happens now. There we go. This is kind of fun. There we go. Much better. All right, we are in business now. So I've got it thoroughly cleaned with a bottle brush and some carburetor cleaner, which actually does a pretty good job of cleaning out those carbon deposits like that. But we're not done yet here. We've got to check another thing. And that, of course, would be checking all of the EGR openings on the car. And I have checked those, and everything is clean and clear. But I do want to try one other thing here real quick just to see if it works. And what I'm thinking is it would really suck to put this all back together and find that also this EGR valve is bad. But right now, because of the design of this, I really can only test it by putting everything back together and then using my scan tool to move the stepper motor. And what I'm hoping I can do is maybe just with ignition on, maybe I can move the stepper motor and visually see the stepper motor movement with the EGR valve removed from the car. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this in, and we'll see if I can get lucky that way. All right, so what my idea is here is I've got the ignition on and I've got my scan tool attached. And what I'm really hoping we're going to be able to do here is see if the scan tool can cause the EGR valve to move. This would validate that I don't need to worry about an EGR valve for this car after reinstalling everything, and find that we still could install the engine by opening it with the scan tool, which I'm not sure if I can do anyway. So the second part is this also validates if my scan tool will actually work on this car. So let's go ahead. I'm going to set to open the valve and let's see what happens. Oh, check that out. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. And then let's make sure that it also closes. So let me go ahead and set to 0 steps. And it closes. All right, awesome. So this is really good indication that, well, I know my scan tool works. That is a definite note I'm going to take if I ever see a Nissan again. A lot of times the scan tool just isn't compatible with cars like that and it won't do anything. It works on this one, and it is good indication that when I put the car back together again, we should see the stumbling effect when I open the EGR valve. If we don't, then I guess I missed a clog or something. So I'll put everything back together and we'll try it out. All right, the engine is all back together. Got my scan tool ready to go, so we'll start it up. It'll probably need a little second or two to settle down because of all the carburetor cleaner and all that stuff. But once it settles down, we know now that the scan tool does indeed work at activating the EGR, so we can see if we've got a fix and if we can cause the engine to stumble by activating the EGR now. Obviously, it did not do that at the beginning of the video because of the clogged tube. So let's go ahead and start it up. All right, actually it started right up, and wow, it actually sounds amazingly smooth. So I guess we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and zoom in on the scan tool. All right, yeah, it definitely sounds good. It actually sounds smoother than when it came in. So here's our EGR valve, and let's turn that on, and let's go ahead and just see if we can get a little bit of an adjustment here. Let's set it to 10 steps here, and you can hear the idle change there for sure. And then let's go ahead and open this thing up, and that should really, yeah, that just killed the engine. Excellent. All right, and that killed the engine, so that is a fix. All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap this up. All right, yet another video where we do a fix without even having to change a part at all. Happens a lot here, doesn't it? And it's all about doing diagnosis instead of swaptronics, which wasn't the case, it turns out, by the way, for the original owner of this car, the person that sold the car. Upon calling my customer and telling him that we have a fix without even having to buy a part, and given that he's only got the 0400 code, and I did go ahead and check fuel trims and catalytic converter activity, which I show how to do in other videos, there is no reason that this car is going to fail other than for the check engine light, which of course I'll do later. But the point is that the owner did tell me that he was looking through the repair history that was left in the glove box, and almost a year ago today, the original owner of the car did bring it into a service shop where they replaced the EGR valve. So we'll never know if it was really a bad EGR valve or if they just missed that carbon plug. I don't think that you're going to get a carbon plug like that in less than a year. But anyway, we can't say for sure, but all we know now is that we definitely have a fix. So, this could have been a little bit different, and it may be different for you. One of the key things, because of the stepper motor here, instead of the solenoid type that we saw in the diagnosis and understanding video before this, the primer on how to do EGR diagnosis, we would have run into a serious problem here had I not had a bidirectional scan tool, because we can't just put 12 volts to the EGR to test it. So in that case, we would have, like I said in the previous video, it's a problem with EGR diagnosis. We would have to be creative, maybe put the vehicle up on jack stands and drive the vehicle on jack stands to create conditions to open the EGR. We may have had to do that, possibly also just dissecting away, finding that clog, putting the car back together, clearing the code, see if it comes back. But definitely you sometimes need the right tools for this, and having an oscilloscope would have certainly been helpful at some point here, as you can see. So I'm going to look more serious into getting that. But anyway, got ourselves a fix here. I'm going to go take care of that check engine light, and then this guy will be ready to go. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this helpful. All right, one final bonus for you guys. I know that a lot of you guys are curious, was the check engine light removed on this car as it was on a couple other examples that I've had? And just wanted to let you guys know that the owner of this car is absolved. The check engine bulb is here, and it is indeed burned out. So no fraud this time, but I have a couple other videos where this bulb was indeed intentionally removed to hide the check engine light. So just wanted to show you guys that. All right, I always like to show the final fix, so let's, where is it? There it is, right there, service engine soon. So we are back in action now.